Okay, switch the batteries out, continue the analysis for the next hour. Hopefully I can get all of this done in an hour. It would be crazy if this exceeded 2 hours, but you know, it'll take it, I think it'll go faster now because we've done sort of all the dirty work, right? We logically built from the appropriation of modus tollens this sentence. This sentence is the conclusion, is the result of the appropriation of modus tollens to the idea that we initially developed by appropriating modus ponens, and then we extracted the idea of derived from, which was the conceptual relationship between the water table and conservation efforts, and insofar as we appropriated modus tollens, we built this as a consequence of that that analysis. So, bottom of page 6, again, the raw sentence, and I just read that several times. If water is conserved, then water is stored in the water table. However, there is less water in the water table, thus water conservation efforts have failed. You would word your sentence differently from how I worded my sentence, right? That's obvious. I'm not so, and you should not at any point be concerned with the wording of the sentence. No matter how you word your sentence, no matter how you select, no matter what words you select, what's really, really beautiful about this, and you know, you'll hear the phrase sometimes, I'm not quite there yet because I'm still relatively, academically speaking, I'm still relatively young in my career. I've only graduated just 3 years ago, and I haven't really sort of amassed sort of my seminal publications yet. I'm in the process of building up that arsenal, if you will. But I remember reading many, too many to count, philosophers in my education, and I would read a paragraph, or I'd read a page or 2 pages, and I would say to myself while I was reading, I cannot pick one single word, not one single word in the previous sentence or paragraph that was unnecessary. I cannot pick one single segment of this essay that is a bit unnecessary. And I was always fascinated by how people consolidate their language in such a concise and precise way that you can't find any superfluous words. How do you do that? How do you write like that? How do you write so precise? And it wasn't until many attempts and many years of failure and many rejections that I realized that they don't do it the way I do this. They might not even have known what it was that they're doing, but I recognize in the background that this is what's operational. This sort of system is what's operational. Because if you follow, you don't have to follow it to this type of rigor that I follow it. And to be honest with you, when I actually write, like I take this to like 4 levels higher than this. Which isn't a good thing or a bad thing. It's not a show-off thing at all. It's just that, you know, for me personally, my writing is extremely arduous. It's an extremely arduous process because I have to go back, and the physical act of me writing is highlighting words that I said before and the relationships and doing this in my head. It takes a lot of time to get to that level, but the result is a very coherent set of claims, right? And yeah, people are prone to error, so I'm definitely going to make mistakes in my writing as well. I'm not saying that what I write is, you know, beyond falsification. No, the stuff that I write can be falsified, but it's going to take a pretty powerful mind to be able to get inside of the logic to find where those errors are. You know, Joe Schmo off the street's not going to be open to that. And like all good philosophers, because we love gameplay, we might just embed a couple of errors to see who the smarty pants are. There won't be any errors in this lecture, right? Because the whole point of this lecture is to teach. But in my writing, you know, you might, as you know, Wittgenstein says, right? So we kick up a dust and then complain we can't see anything. The whole point of the game is to embed a few errors and to see who's really cutting the mustard with respect to their observational abilities. Top of page 7. Okay. So the implication of the raw sentence. So you might not understand what this means right now, but let's continue. Right. So if water is conserved, again, top of page 7, then water is stored in the water table. However, there is less water in the water table, thus water conservation efforts have failed. Right. That's what we got. The next phase of the analysis, you're like, oh my goodness, there's more to this. There is, right? And go slowly through this, right? This is, as I said, this lecture series is not for the average viewer. Even some of my more hardcore viewers will probably have tapped out and called uncle already. Some of you will make it all the way to the end, but the idea is you have to go through this slowly so that you see. It's not just for it to be a long series. That's not the point. The whole point is so that you see, so that you witness, you watch me, and you read in the notes, so that you see the phases. It's evolving into something more complex, right? We don't know yet where this is going, but this is gradually evolving very, very simply with the most basic assumptions, with the most basic rules of inference, and this is going to evolve into something rather complex when it's done. But if we just look at the final product and then try to deconstruct it, it's too difficult. So the idea in this lecture series is to build this very gradually, very slowly, so that you see the construction of this argument, right? At every phase of, every point of the way, so that it's undeniably been demonstrated, right? That's the point. The next phase of the analysis, and this truly is the magic of logic. If you follow the logic, things you didn't anticipate will surface from the argument, and as you get better, your paper will effectively write itself. I'm not making that up. I have people ask me all the time, Dr. Campbell, because I'm doing these lecture series, but my book's coming out in, like, from a good press, a great press. My book's coming out in, like, I don't even know, like a month or 2 months from the uploading of this video. And I'm about at the halfway point of a second book, which picks up all the logical arguments from the first book and applies it to the new book. Plus teaching classes and being a dad and being a husband and all that other crap. How the hell do you find the time? Because I spend so much time in my pre-planning phase working through, and I really do this, working through the logic, that the logic effectively writes itself. The paper effectively writes itself. I don't have to try and come up with filler to stumble on a new point. I just need to be really, really consistent in the logic, and the logic will literally generate new points of this. I'm not making this up. And you will see this. I'm going to point to this in a second, so that you know that I'm not making this up. The logic will literally, I don't know how, I'll let somebody else smarter than me explain how, which would be a very good explanation of how this occurs, but the logic literally generates new points of discussion itself. What do I mean by that? Seriously. For example, in the above sentence, to prove to you now, right, in the above sentence, the claim, so look at the above sentence, and now look at the claim, there is less water. If water is conserved, then water is stored in the water table. However, there is less water. I got, however, there is less water as a consequence of the appropriation of modus tollens. However, there is less water is part 3 of modus tollens. It's a little bit more advanced now, I hope you're following along, which is the denial of the consequence. I didn't do anything other than insert part 3, the denial of the consequence. The denial of the consequence results in the claim that, however, there is less water. So, for example, in the above sentence, the claim there is less water implies, there's an implication that that logic posits in the world. To say, however, there is less water is an implication. We recognize that it really is the appropriation of part 3 in modus tollens, which is simply the denial of the consequence, not B. So we recognize, logically speaking, all we did was just say not B, but not B in the real world, outside of logic, has an implication. To say, however, there's less water has an implication. The idea is, what is the implication of saying, however, there is less water? Implies necessarily that someone has measured and verified, right? To say that, however, there is less water means in the real world that somebody actually went out there to verify that there is indeed less water. So that the logic created a real world implication. Literally, from pure logical reason, we now have a real world implication that can or cannot be verified. To say that, however, there is less water means, if I mean it and I'm being honest and forthright, however, there's less water. Well, the question is, well, how do you know